There were a number of box office bombs in 2023, but the Walt Disney Company took the crown as serving up the most in terms of pure number. And Deadline's own worst of the worst list, well, of course, was helmed by Disney. But are Deadline's numbers actually accurate, or were things even worse than what they suggested? Renegade Online. Talking about some of the biggest successes. We already know what number 2 and number 1 are going to be. It's no secret. It's going to be Super Mario Brothers and Barbie. It doesn't take rocket scientists to figure that out. We don't have to wait for Anthony D'Alessandro to drop his Deadline articles tomorrow and Tuesday on those. But he's doing a great job. Disney detonates 4 bombs in Deadline's 2023 Most Valuable Blockbuster Tournament. So last week we talked about Guardians of the Galaxy. Told everybody why that was a bit of a bogus notion of that it was one of the top 10 in terms of
you for the very first time you proved to me that it's a flop. Listen, you and I argued a little bit last year, and I said no, it's going to eke out 10 to 15, and you stood steady and said no, Pro, this is a flop. Yeah, you were right. You were 100% right.
I don't think it's going to happen, and it didn't. But let's talk about these, because I think we all kind of know what some of these are going to be. The Marvels. Now they're saying here, and I'm going to pull up the details in a minute. They're showing, the Marvels having a net loss of $237 million.
These include marketing?
Well, we'll get there. Yeah,
okay.
The Flash showing a net loss of $155 million. Indiana Jones, a net loss of $143. I know everybody out there in the audience right now is chuckling. They're like, there's no way. There got to be way more. You're right.
Yeah.
So Wish losing $131 million. And Haunted Mansion losing $117 million. So
where's Ant-Man?
This is the right. Well, yeah, that wasn't the worst of the 4, I guess, in that regard. Which I don't know how. And that was my first question too. Is like, shouldn't Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania be floating in here?
It should be. It absolutely should be.
It may have been beat out by other ones, like, because again, they're using, this is what the budget is numbers, right? Not the actual cost, like
right.
So let me switch this out real quick, and let me pull up the actual detail pages here, because I had to have those set up in a different window. But what that gives us is, go away, pop-up ad. Already covered Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse earlier, so let's start looking at some of these films. Okay, The Marvels. This is what they're saying. They're saying it lost $237. So let's go down the list and just let's kind of beat the numbers up. Nothing, again, I'm going to say this to remind folks, nothing personal against Anthony D'Alessandro. Guy does a fabulous job doing box office reporting, and I understand that they have to use some type of formula to put this together, although we know that some of these numbers are just not right, and for one reason or another. $206 million came in for The Marvels globally, theatrically, saying $88 million of that is what made it back to Disney, which is probably about right. When we look down at the production cost of $270 million, that was the net cost that got reported by Forbes magazine, but we also understand that that wasn't the total bill yet. There was still a few months of outstanding production, post-production, that was going to be linked into this that is not yet there. So this is just information that we have as of right now. $110 million in global prints and ads. There's your marketing. So about just shy of $400 million all in, with $88
I'm so glad to see, by the way, them doing that now. I think you've sort of forced their hand. Honestly, Valiant, this was, 2 or 3 years ago, marketing costs were never, ever, ever, put into this kind of stuff, except on rare occasion. I think you've done a phenomenal job of getting analysts out there to say,
Yeah. Well, more people are talking about it, but I will say that when it comes to this, the Blockbuster list, the top 10 list, the Deadline's been doing this now for, I think, at least 2 or 3, 4 years before the pandemic. They took a break for a couple of years, but when they did these lists, they were doing estimates on P&L. But again, it wasn't for every picture; it was just the ones that made the top 10 list. But if you look here, so again, television and streaming, $90 million. Where's that coming from? Disney's own pocket. take that 90 million out. So it's really not 237 as a loss. Throw the 90 million back in there because Disney's not really making 90 million on this in television and streaming. It's going to Disney Plus. That's the end of it. Okay, Disney's paying itself like Paramount pays itself for the Turtles movie. We talked about that one earlier. Home entertainment, they're saying that $40 million worth, or at least that Disney got $40 million from the total sales, $40 million worth of PVOD and physical media for this movie. I'm sorry, I kind of doubt that. I mean, nobody watched this thing in the theaters. I kind of doubt that 25% of the theatrical audience went out and bought copies of the movie or whatever the case is. Especially when it goes to Disney Plus right at the same time. But maybe it did. But let's take the 90 million out. So this movie really lost at least $330 million thereabout. And it's only going to get bigger as the additional production costs that haven't been tabulated that haven't been filed in the UK production entity yet, once that comes into play. Now let's look
and that's why the Marvels is probably, I thought Indiana Jones, The Dial of Destiny would be the biggest flop, but I think the Marvels is going to be the biggest flop in the history of cinema. And that seems to be close to confirmed.
It'll be up there.
Tom, what do you got? Tom, look at that face. Tom, what are you coming up with that's a bigger flop?
The only reason I say that or waffling like that is because we know Indiana Jones costs so goddamn much.
Yeah.
Oh, I agree with you.
And I had heard from on the Flash side of things, I had heard that was the most expensive movie that Warner Brothers had ever made. In fact, I heard the budget went up somewhere above the $500 million range. And you got to remember, they started shooting that movie in 1982. So I mean,
yeah. Well, let's look at Indiana Jones. Okay.
So, yeah, and I know Indiana Jones cost more than $500 million because of you guys. So,
it's climbing there. The information that we have so far. Well, let's look at it. Worldwide, 384 million came in. They're saying the theatrical cut of that gross was 173
I'm also adding
million.
reshoots to that. That's why I come up with above that. Yeah. Sorry.
Well, the $300 million production cost, we know that was up through, I have to go back and look at it again. I think it was up through the end of the year before the year it came out. So it came out last summer. So I think the last financial filing was from the year before. So there was
off the top of my head, it was 337 was the final number we came up with,
it was
right?
330 million. That was at the time. And again, now there were some netting out of film tax credits for that, right? But again, that 300 million, let's just say that, okay, with film tax credits and everything, that's where it's going to rest. I think it's still going to be higher. I think it's going to be closer to 350 when all said and done, even with the tax credits. Prints and ads at 120 million. So basically an all-in cost, realistically, we're approaching $500 million.
How do the prints and ads compare? Real quick, the prints and ads on Indy, how do they compare to the Marvels? I'm interested in that.
The Marvels,
well, I bet you they spent almost twice what Marvels did.
Well, the Marvels was what do you say? 80. The Marvels was 110, so a little bit less than Indy. And again, these are Deadline's advertising industry experts that put the estimate together based on observable ad buys and everything else that they were doing. And I think they're usually pretty reasonable with those figures from what I can see. So of course there goes my camera again because it's getting warm in this room and blah, blah, blah. I'll have to reset the battery. No big deal. All right. So back to Indiana Jones. So let's look at this. So 120 million. So we're looking at realistically, there's more production costs that have not come in yet. That's probably going to bring the total between marketing and production to around $500 million. This movie got 173 million coming in. Television and streaming, 120 million. Yeah, right. Again, this is another Disney scam job with moving money from the right pocket to the left pocket. There's no 120 million that's actually coming in from anywhere but Disney. It's not being sold.
That's really fascinating. Why do you think they gave a bigger number to this versus the Marvels? What would cause them to say, "Oh, well, the Marvels made 90, Indy made 120"?
Usually, it's based on the box office.
Oh, yes. I see. So as a percent, gotcha. It just ran through a standard formula then that they have.
Well, not so much a standard formula. So, for example, let's say that you have a deal with Netflix to, give them the pay one window on streaming rights for something, and you make a movie, and that movie does $100 million at the global box office. You're going to pay less to acquire the streaming rights for that movie than Avatar. I mean, something that's going to have a $2 billion box office or even a $500 million box office. The prices for the streaming rights or the distribution rights post-theatrical typically are tied to some relatively substantial degree to the overall box office, because that determines the interest, right? Oh, this was a really hot movie. A lot of people are going to want to watch this when it hits television, so you can demand a higher price for the streaming rights. So they're estimating here that, oh, well, based on this, Disney would be paying itself $120 million over the course of time, over several years, because not all that has materialized. $80 million in home entertainment. Were there really $80 million worth of PVOD sales, of digital downloads, of physical media for this movie? Ugh. I mean, again, they're saying that 80 million came in from that. That means that the retail figure would have been higher, would have been significantly higher.
It's a lot of really bad Christmas gifts. It's a lot of really bad Christmas gifts.
Seriously. I mean, it's like, yeah, I don't
know.
know.
You take this 120 out. So you take the 120 out because that's paying Disney. We all agree that's just silly to count it. Take the 120 out, add the 50 that we know should be added to that production budget. Yeah. We're at 310 then. So a $310 million loss. As much as I believed that this was the biggest flop of all time, I still think the Marvels is going to edge it out.
Yeah, I think it will too. The problem is they both had a lot of reshoots, a lot of expenses and neither production has had its final tally in. It might be another 6 to 8 months before we really start getting the final figures. But look, the bottom line is that at least Indiana Jones did $384 million at the box office, whereas the Marvels didn't even break 200, right? So that's the difference. That's really
that is true. That is true.
Yeah, that's what's bailing this out. Let's look at the next one on the list. How about Wish? They're saying Wish lost $131 million. Now, again, this movie would have been far less embarrassing if they had just shoved this onto Disney Plus and hidden it from the world. This would have been the better way to go. But they didn't. This movie raked in $253 million worldwide. Actually, 60 million more than the Marvels, if you can believe it. Theatrical revenue, they're saying, came down at 106. Obviously, there was a significant portion from overseas and China. You can see their domestic was only $64 million. Nobody in Disney's most core of core markets, nobody gave a crap about this movie in the U.S. and Canada. Nobody. 64 million, I'm sorry, for a headline Disney animated feature film is abysmal. I know it's not Strange World abysmal, or what was the other one they had? Not Lightyear. There was another one besides Lightyear that was terrible too. But the point is that this is just bad. So they got $106 million back from that. Again, we have this $85 million phantom nonsense for television and streaming, which is we're dumping it on Disney Plus. It's a balance sheet move. Did they really net $40 million from home entertainment sales of this film? I highly doubt it. Who are the biggest consumers of this movie? Kids. Where are kids going to watch this movie? They're going to watch it on Disney Plus. I seriously doubt they're spending that much on home entertainment. Again, that's $40 million netting back to Disney. That's not retail. Retail would be even more than $40 million. And then you look at production costs and P&A, $300 million. So the reality on this movie is it lost $200 million. It made about $106 million from the theater, which is the only real revenue that this movie received. That's basically the equivalent of the estimated marketing spend. The whole $200 million budget is gone. Poof. It's just an overpriced Disney Plus movie that will be on and off the Nielsen charts within a couple of weeks. And then everybody will forget
the other thing that we know is that Film Threat has reported that the actual production costs were $250. And I trust Film Threat to know what they're talking about. The other thing I would say too is there's a real loser who's not on this list. And that is everybody who was a licensing partner with Disney. I cannot tell you the number of that stupid talking goat plushies, the little star, whatever her name is. I can't even remember her name that she's in this, but all of those characters, like they didn't sell, they didn't move. And I talked, Valiant, one of the things that's going to be really helpful this week in relaying some scoops, let's say, is I had a chance to talk with somebody, and I hope they're out in the audience right now listening, someone who is in the know when it comes to this sort of thing. And they said that within Disney right now, the best way to describe how they talk about Wish or what they think about Wish inside the company at the highest levels is,
I know where this is going.
It's verboten. You don't talk about it. It doesn't exist.
You don't talk about Bruno or Wish.
You don't bring it up. And if you were to bring up Wish, then you're not being, quote, Disney nice, unquote.
Right. Yeah. They want to forget that this catastrophic embarrassment ever happened. But I got one more on this list. We need to talk about Haunted Mansion. Haunted Mansion.
This is such a bad movie. This is so painful to go watch.
This movie, they set the production cost at $150 million, which I think is about right, from what I remember. Prints and ads. They did not spend a lot of money on this. $65 million.
I heard they saved a lot of money on lighting.
Yeah.
That joke is only funny if you've actually seen the dang thing, but yeah.
I know, yeah.
Same as Little Mermaid, by the way. Darn it, where did the lighting go? Now we can't see the CGI.
Yeah. So this one showed $117 million as a loss, but again, let's talk about the reality here. The total revenue that came back to Disney, $53 million. 1/3 of the production cost doesn't even cover the prints and ads. This movie basically lost $200 million. That's it. Simple as that. Or I'm sorry, about 150, pardon me. About 150, 160 million is what we're really looking at. So,
any thoughts on why they didn't put the Little Mermaid in this list at all? I mean, did we have to artificially cap it at 5? I would love to see the Little Mermaid.
There may be
numbers they think they have.
Yeah, there may be more coming. They don't do every single movie. I wish they would. They take these are the top 10 best based on this formula that we use, and these are the ones that performed the worst based on this formula that we used. So you have to assume that Little Mermaid was somewhere in the middle. And if we go back, since you brought it up, it's not a bad exercise.
We're in a bonkers world where they're like, oh, well, it only lost $150 million. We can't put it on the Disney list this year.
Oh, right.
I mean, what kind of craziness is this?
Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.